you imagine that where people dig jazz, any place in the world, they would know about Bud Powell. Where we don't get that is in the United States. To me, Bud is one of the quaint jazz geniuses of all time. And it's about time he got his due.
1, 2, 3.
This is where it happened, man. This is like a shrine to me. This is where it happened for me, man. This is where I woke up and really tasted the music. My dad had a record shop on 141st Street and 8th Avenue. And one day, a guy came in there, and it was Richard Powell, Bud's little brother. He told me he was Bud's brother. I didn't believe him, so he told me he was coming to get me on Sunday and prove it to me. And we went into this building and up to the second floor to this apartment. And he knocked, he went in the door, and sat me on the couch. He comes back and opens the door, and there's a guy standing with him. And the guy with him says, "You don't believe I'm Bud Powell?" And man, I almost lost it. I said, I don't, he said, turned around and walked over to the piano and opened it and sat down. And the minute he hit those keys, man, I said, oh my God.
I did.
So tell me the entire story. Where, when, how, and what it was like.
I was playing with a group called the Jazz Tet. It was the art farmer, Benny Golson.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are here to celebrate the life and legacy of one great Bud Powell. Gentlemen, ladies, please come have a seat. I would echo those words about the very brilliant and thought-provoking and energizing Bunny, Diane, for putting us all together. This is an amazing event, and just thank you again for inviting us to be a part of this to celebrate Bud's life and legacy. Allow me to introduce our panel this afternoon. Haeyong Moon, who did the documentary, is an independent filmmaker based in Los Angeles. She graduated from Binghamton University in 1999 with a dual bachelor's degree in cinema and psychology. That's a great combination, isn't it? She then received a master's degree in fine arts from the California Institute of the Arts, better known as Cal Arts, in 2004. She has held multiple positions in the film industry and continues to work on independent films. Haeyong Moon is known for Broadway Treasures in 2019, The Boss Baby 2017, and Trolls 2016. Haeyong Moon. Adam Ledbetter was born in a creative family and got his first performance experience at the age of 3. He wasn't wasting any time. At 10, he began taking formal piano lessons, and within a few months, he was working as the church's full-time musical director. How did that happen? Growing up in that role, it allowed him to fine-tune his musical instincts with his classical studies, gave him a keen proficiency at the piano. Adam is just at home and giving solo piano recitals as he is freestyling on the mic. As an MC, he has been featured on a work by Lightheaded Omega Watts, Jabby, Sean C. Johnson, and many others. In 2007, his band Adam and Kizzy, which he co-leads with his wife Kizzy, were finalists in Usher's International Megastar Competition. Adam believes music is a spectrum, and for him, styles of music are instruments in his band, and it's best when they play together. Adam and Kizzy released the book of Edo Volume 3, Edo Volume 3, Play Together. Volume 3, Fredo, in 2018 on Rope-A-Dope Records. Adam Ledbetter. And last but not least, the legend himself. He just told me he will be turning 90 years old here in a minute. All I can say is that McCurdy good black don't crack. This is true. I'm right behind him too. I'm right behind him. Before joining Cannonball Adderley's quintet in 1965 and staying with the band until Adderley's death in 1975, he has played with the Mangione and Gap Brothers, and the Jazz Brothers from 1960 to 1961, as well as with Bobby Timmons, Betty Carter, Sonny Rollins, appearing on the classic 1963 album, Sonny Meets Hawk. Roy attended Eastman School of Music for about a minute. It was about a minute, wasn't it? During which time he also played professionally with Roy Eldridge, Eddie Cleanhead Vincent. At 17 years old, in 1960 he joined Art Farmer's band, Benny Golson's jazz tent, and remained with him for 2 years. Among his influences include Louis Bellson, Shirley Mann, Sam Woodard, Buddy Rich, Papa Joe Jones, Philly Joe Jones, the bands of Duke Ellington, Jimmy Lunsford, and Lionel Hampton. I could go on for days, but this resume is but say hello to my favorite cousin, Roy McCurdy. Now, we were here to celebrate the life and legacy of Bud Powell. I want to sort of contextualize the time in which he lived and the time that bebop began to evolve. We were coming off the end of World War II, off of the swing era. And swing, we know, was probably the most popular time for jazz because it involved what? Dancing. But after World War II, things began to change. Cabaret taxes made it difficult for clubs to maintain large big bands. And you had black musicians who were, dare I say, very tired of being considered entertainers. That first generation of jazz musicians, we're talking about Louis Armstrong, Cap Calloway, Billy Eckstine, and others, they were primarily playing big bands for dancing, for entertaining. But that second generation, the Bud Powells, the Thelonious Monks, the Charlie Parkers, the Dizzy Gillespie's, they wanted to recognize that they were artists. So this whole style that we call bebop was as evolutionary as it was revolutionary. So all of a sudden, you had these young lions, these people who were born in the early 1920s, the second decade of the 20th century. They said, you know what, we don't want to just be looked upon as entertainers. We want to come up with a new genre, a new style of music. They weren't concerned about entertaining people. They had this sort of attitude where they were connoisseurs of the music, which means that they were concerned about making music, not necessarily entertaining people. If you liked it, wonderful. If you didn't like it, that was on you. That was kind of their attitude, right? But it was very cerebral music. You had to bring something intellectually to that music. It wasn't just about tapping, well, it wasn't about tapping your toes, but it was also about self-expression. And we know this whole idea of this particular genre, it was banned in many other countries because it represented freedom. Yes? So I'm gonna start with Roy because I think you asked a question on the video, that you didn't get a chance to answer. What was the question that was asked in the video?
You played with Bud. Tell me where, how, and how that felt.
Yeah, it was kind of a fluke the way I got to play with Bud. I was traveling with a band called Mitchell and Ruff, which was usually a duo, and they added the drums, and I was playing with them. We were traveling through Europe and doing a lot of jazz festivals. We ended up in Copenhagen, and we did our performance, and then we had some time off. We had about 10 days off. And the promoter said, there's a club in town called the Jazz House, and Bud Powell's working there, and he needs a group. And he said, would you be willing to play with Bud Powell? And I said, hell yeah. So it was myself and Willie Ruff, who was the bass player, and we played a whole week with him. It was an incredible thing, a beautiful experience. You saw that picture?
Yes.
On the picture there was the trio, but also Cannonball was there, but he was just in town to do the Jazz Festival. Yeah, so he sat in. That was about 2 years before I was with him. So
basically, you were auditioning for Cannonball on that game, basically, yes?
well, I had known Cannonball a couple of years before that. Yeah. Because he recorded us with the Jazz Brothers, the Jolie Brothers. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So Haeyong, let me ask you this question. What inspired you to investigate this whole documentary about Bud Powell? I mean, there's so many other artists that you could have chosen. Why Bud?
Well, this is amazing to be part of this panel, and I loved hearing what you had to say, because it kind of lays out that whole time period where Bud and Monk and Charlie Parker came about. I discovered Bud in the 90s in college in New York, upstate New York. In my film class, my teacher played a record of Charlie Parker. And I didn't grow up listening to jazz, but when I first heard Bird, it just lit up my brain, and I had to learn and listen to more of it. And then eventually I heard the Quintet album, which is a very famous album from 1953, and it has Bud Powell on piano. And that was it. I just kept on having to listen to him. So I've been a fan for 25 years plus, and I knew that I wanted to make a film about him one day, because he's not as known as Bird or Dizzy or Monk, and so I wanted to, make a tribute film. And I was fortunately able to meet with Roy, and in the film I do interview him, and he talks about that experience playing with him in Copenhagen. I also interviewed Chuck Israels, who also played with him in Paris in his early 20s. So, yeah, I've been a fan. So this is a true love letter to Bud Powell.
Yes, thank you for that. Give it up. Now, Adam, you are the baby of this panel. You are a young man, and just from your bio, you have a very eclectic approach to music. You do a lot of different things, and rarely do you find a young musician who's MCing, rapping, playing bebop, producing. So what led you to this whole adventure of Bud Powell?
I remember the first time I discovered Bud Powell was from my dad's album collection. My father was a drummer back in the day. He's a pastor now, but he had roots in jazz drumming from the DMV area. And I found a record of his that was like an anthology. It had Errol Garner, it had Bud Powell, and I think it had Barry Harris, and there were just a few selections. And it was the first time I'd heard of any of these piano players. We used to go to the local library and check out videos on jazz, because I always heard the stories. And so I thought it was cool hearing about these heroes of jazz music, and it just kind of represented like the totality of what music could be. So when I put on the record, what really struck me about Bud Powell and his music, for one, it's like bebop is an entirely different kind of discipline and approach to the language of the music. And what Bud, I think, did for the music was he created a pathway for the music to be played on the piano that in a way kind of erased the piano. So, and that is like, there's no pianist that sounds like Bud Powell. Not before, and not even after, really. You can hear his influence in every piano player that came after, but he exposed the music on this instrument in a way it hadn't really been revealed before. There's not a lot of notes being played at once, but the flow of ideas, you know, is just so pure, so architecturally sound, so it's real, you know. It's not a music you can really fake. It is exposing kind of music. But yeah, Bud was a genius. I just remember when I first heard it, I had never heard anything quite like it. In a way, the Errol Garner sounded more familiar to me, even though he was very much a stylist and had his own thing. It made more immediate sense to me. Bud was something that I kind of had to wrestle with to understand, like, why does it sound so angular? Why did he play the chord that way? You know, where's it coming from?
Yes, yes, yes. And again, for my non-jazz performing people in the audience, this bebop style, it was a risk-filled music, a virtuosic kind of music. The tempos were often faster. The harmonies were much more complex. You're using more altered extensions rather than going ba 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 ba. Now you get ba 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 be be bo be bo be bo bo be bo do 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 do. You get like all kinds of diminished scales. So it's a whole different way of playing. And what we found, where the solos were outlined by the chord progressions. So if you're doing a song like, let's say like Whispering, ends up being a tune called Groovin' High. So the original song would go la da da dee da 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 la da da dee da 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 da, became ba da ba da ba do ba do ba do 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 ba do da do ba do 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 do. Right? So you're improvising based on the chord progression, but you're doing it on the spot. Now, when we look at other piano players who preceded Bud Powell, we think about the influences of James P. James P. Johnson. Yeah, James P. Johnson. Think about Art Tatum, who also had a very virtuosic style, but it was more of a stride piano, which was a descendant of ragtime, right? But now, Bud Powell just has to go in a whole different direction where his right hand became the dominant voice. The left hand was for comping, right hand was for just outlining the chords. Do you think, I mean, Brian, maybe you can answer this question. Do you think his time with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie was able to transfer what they were doing on their horns to the piano? And how would that work?
I don't know. I think so. I'm not sure, but you'd have to ask this young man here. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
So, kind of going back to my earlier comment about Bud, in a way, he kind of erased the piano. So when you mention like Art Tatum and James P. Johnson, these are people who had really piano-centric styles of music. That it's not even really music that could be played on just any instrument. It's built for the piano. Like Harlem Stride is very much a piano-based style of music. And, Earl Father Hines is another one, very pianistic gestures.
Yes.
Whereas Bud Powell, it really didn't feel like it was about the piano. It really felt like it was about the music and the contour of the melody and what the music is supposed to be speaking. And I think that just really kind of opened doors for what role the piano could even play in a band. And the roles would have had to shift because the band sizes were changing, the function of the music was changing, like you were saying. So he gave us a difficult path to follow, but I think a path towards modernism that really we wouldn't have found if we were chasing more like pianistic expressions, It was just the music. That's the way I always understood it.